In Bolivia, we were asked by the Taft Foundation out of Utah. It's funded by the Mormon Church, actually. And they had heard about earthships and tire building. And in the mountains there, near the Altiplano, at 14,000 feet, they had a site outside La Paz that the government there had built a lot of housing and no one was using because it was too cold. And so they asked us to go and demonstrate an earthship room and paid our expenses. We worked for free and spent about 10 days with the locals putting up an Earthship U, which was replicated and used for schools and is still being evolved down there. The Earthship concept is still being applied. We haven't had follow-up because we haven't had funding to go back and see what's going on. But they did go ahead and finish the building, and it turned out to be a good use of tires and a good way to make warm buildings there, and they are benefiting from it. The insulation we had to use there was straw right from the fields. And we first started dealing with trusses there because their timbers were just twisted little spindly pieces of wood. And we had to lay out a truss on a basketball court and have people making trusses out of little bitty pieces of wood. And we came back to Taos and started using trusses ourselves. The interesting thing there was that the first day we were there, the Army came and was shooting machine guns into our tires, our tire stash, and because they thought the gringos are bringing their garbage there for them to use. And we gave them a copy of Earthship Volume 1, which thoroughly explains why we're doing what we're doing. The next day they came back, they brought us tires, they brought us cans, and then cooperated with us from then on once they realized what we were doing. The thing you'd see about this building that's different than the ones in Taos is that the angle of the greenhouse is very flat due to the fact that this building is very near the equator and the sun is high in the sky even though it's winter there. And it does get very cold. This is at 14,000 feet with 22 and 24,000 foot mountains all around it. The Japan Earthship project was originated from a TV personality in Japan, came over here to do a show on earthships. He was so moved by what he saw with the earthships up at the Reach community and the ones down here in Taos that he wanted us to go build a demo in Japan. And so he was an entrepreneur over there. He arranged for us to go build a demonstration earthship to be used as a pavilion on the island of Shikoku in the town of Saita town. And we were very well equipped there. Japanese have all the equipment, and we had tools and track hoe and everything and tires. The whole town came out to help us pound tires. The mayor and his wife helped us pound tires. They gave us, we were there 10 days. They gave us 4 welcome to Japan parties and 4 going away parties. So they practically killed us on sake and beer in the 10 days that we were there. We did a retaining wall up against the bank behind the building, separating the building from the very unstable sandy hill that it was setting on. And this turned out to be a very good idea because 2 or 3 weeks after we left, the heavy rains came and many of the other pavilions and walkways and picnic tables and things were just washed away, and this building remained. In our books and in various publicity in the media, it got out that we were playing with a solar toilet. Our efforts with a solar toilet and even compost toilets were that conventional flush toilets use precious fresh water to flush with, and water's getting to be an issue on the planet. And they also put the the sewage into the aquifers through the septic systems and sewage systems, and we didn't want to do either one of these, so we were seriously working on compost toilets and solar toilets. Our solar toilet worked very good, but it was very difficult to market and sell them due to the just absolute unconventional approach to dealing with human waste. But they did work very well for places like the high Himalayas, in the mountaineering camps, where human waste doesn't go away. It won't break down at that altitude, and certainly they can't have flush toilets at that temperature. So we were asked to donate 2 solar toilets. And so we went with them. The Indian government, when we got there with the 2 solar toilets, would not let them through customs, even though they were a donation to the Indian government. So we ended up having to make them over there in Darjeeling before we trekked up into the mountains to install them. That turned out to be a reasonably good thing, because then we showed how they could be made from their local materials and tools. So we trekked in 4-wheel drive 3 days, hiking 3 days up to 18,000 feet, and installed 2 solar toilets, and they are still being used today. As a matter of fact, you can Google solar toilets Kanchenjunga. That's the base of Kanchenjunga, the 3rd highest peak, and there's quite a story about them on that site. When Hurricane Mitch came and destroyed lots of beach, coastline, and everything near Honduras, was one of the hardest hit, and we on our own decided to go there. It turned out that at that same time, a group called Operation Shoebox, which was delivering meds and everything to that area, they were working out of Oregon, and they asked to team up with us. And we went down there not knowing what we were going to do, planning to work in the jungle. We ended up being given a piece of land to build this demonstration on the grounds of a vocational school right in the middle of Tegucigalpa. This came about as a result of the Earthship books being sold down there, and people were familiar with it, and a banker hooked us up with all this because he had read the books. And so we were building a room that would be resistant to hurricanes and stay cool and catch water. Those were the issues. And the first 2 or 3 days down there, they thought we were a bunch of crazy gringos packing dirt into tires. And then when the tire work was up and they saw how strong it was and we were starting to get the first roof on, they started seeing how substantial this building was, and the Army actually came and helped us then, and they're going to use them for bunkers. So the building there was very successful, and again, like on many of them, we shot from the hip and had to come up with some ideas for the roof and the dome of the roof that we brought back to the States and go ahead and develop them further here and use them. So each one of these global trips, demonstration trips that we go on, not only helps the local area that's been stricken with a disaster, but it causes us to gain and stretch our knowledge about the whole Earthship concept and bring it back to the States and take it further. The Belgium Earthship project was originated from a woman seeing our website and deciding to come to our seminar straight from Belgium. And she came to the seminar, wanted one in Belgium. Belgium was the beginning of our realization of the fact that many countries, including the U.S., want this and need this kind of technology for the future, but they, due to their laws and codes, they can't let themselves do it until several years of legislation has been modified, and we just do not have time for that. But Belgium was our first glimpse of that. The woman commissioned us to do drawings. We were going to go over and build a demonstration room of her future home outside of Belgium. and in a place called Boint, and at the last minute the mayor of the area changed his mind and said it looked too weird and wouldn't let her do it. So we were already on our way over there. We ended up building a prototype demo that she used for herb gardening in her backyard of her home, just outside of Brussels. And this was totally illegal, but the mayor of that area came and saw it and liked it and said, I'm supposed to bust you, but I'm not going to because I think this is a good thing. It was on TV. The woman took a big risk. We took a risk, but it has basically it opened up Earthships in Europe and again taught us many things opened our eyes to how we were going to try and get this concept to be not only accepted but allowed throughout the world. In the Belgium trip, we did a couple of other lectures which sparked the beginning of an Earthship project in Scotland and another in the UK. And the basic building that we did in Belgium also launched us on the idea of packing up an entire Earthship building, all components and everything except for tire work, and putting it in a freight container and shipping it anywhere on the planet. So the Belgium project launched many other ideas. Then we were contacted by people with the Lakota Sioux tribe on the reservation up in South Dakota. It turns out that the Indians have a lot of land, and now they're starting to get money from gambling, and they do not have the rules that and the codes that all of the United States and Europe have. Even though they're in the United States, they're supposed to be sovereign entities. And so they wanted the Earthship technology up there to stay warm, because the government up there is providing mobile home type structures for them, and then getting them on a grid and a monthly payment, which they can't afford to keep the places heated. In other words, the Indian people can't even afford the utilities that it takes to run a mobile home. So they asked us to come up there. We achieved funding from a lecture that we did in San Francisco, and the funding didn't come in time, so we borrowed the money and went on and did it, and we did get the funding eventually. The design that we used was the design that we did shot from the hip with building the Belgium building in the woman's backyard. We ended up using that design because it was a similar situation in the Lakota Sioux Reservation. What was interesting there is that they took us out to the site, which was about 12 miles of gravel road and then 3 or 4 miles of no road, out in the middle of this field in South Dakota that is land that the Crazy Horse family owns still today, and they just said, build it here. That was all the approvals we needed. That showed us that third world countries and the Indian reservations in the United States can actually take the lead in sustainable housing because their rules do not inhibit them from evolution like they do in Europe and in the U.S. The Mexicali project came about from an old friend of mine from Taos, whose father was the mayor, Mayor Cantu, back in the late 60s, early 70s. Actually, my first job in Taos was playing guitar and harmonica in a bar on the plaza called La Cantina. And the guy that ran the bar then, the son of Mayor Cantu, went on to get involved in the Sonoran Desert Alliance, which helps the Indian tribes down in that area. And they had the same problem with housing and utilities. And so they wanted us to make a demonstration in Mexicali. And there we used some of the ideas that we came up with for the Belgium project. We actually packaged the entire building, put it in a U-Haul truck and drove it down there. And all we had to do there was bang up the tire work and assemble the building. And it worked perfectly. We put the building up in 10 days with windows, doors, roof, and everything. And this building was aimed at staying cool and being able to be done with unskilled people. and in both cases it was successful. Again, we would have liked to have had follow-up and a budget to go down and continue the work after we did the demonstration, and that's what we're about to work out in the next years. The Scotland project came about as a result of the lecture we did in Stirling while over in Europe doing the Belgium project. And it took a full 2 years, if not more, to get approvals to do this. But the locals in Scotland worked with us, and we ended up getting connected with Robin Harper, a member of Scottish Parliament, and we did hammer our way through to be able to do a demo there. But it is worthy of noting that it took 2 years to do it, and we don't have that kind of time as we go into a future with melting ice caps and global warming. But it took 2 years to do it, to get it approved, and we went over and did another demonstration building, which again evolved Earthships further for different climates, because here we used the first double greenhouse. That was done because we wanted to reduce heat loss, because there's a minimum amount of solar gain in Scotland due to the cloudy, rainy climate. The project had quite a few issues, like working in the rain for 8 out of the 10 days, and architects and engineers telling us what we should be doing and not really having a clue themselves. But we pulled it off, and it turns out to be one of the better looking demos that we have anywhere. The building had 1,000 people at its grand opening. It's being used as a visitor center now, and as you can see, it was faced to look quite a bit to fit in with the Scottish castles and farmhouses. And it was a beginning for illustrating that Earthships can not only be adapted to any climate, they can be adapted to traditional looks to a certain degree. The Brighton, England Earthship demonstration project again came from the Belgium, a lecture that we did in Brighton while we were doing the Belgium project. And it was a group formed then, after we did the lecture in Brighton, they formed a group called LCN, Low Carbon Network, and arranged funding to build an entire building this time. We again, as a team, went over and built the first room of the building so that we could demonstrate the process. And just like Scotland, it took 2 years or more for the approvals, and also many architects and engineers and opinions. It made it just, it's amazing the contrast between a developed country in Europe or the US and a third world country or an Indian reservation. The approvals and the people who need to get paid to make opinions and assessments and basically just get in our way slows everything down and makes it several times more expensive as well. We don't have that kind of time anymore, which is what we're trying to demonstrate by doing more and more projects around the world and focusing on third world countries. The project, however, did get built, and it was successful. It's still actually being finished today because it was an entire building. We threw our part up as usual in 10 days. Again, it was made much harder by the local officials and code inspectors and people that didn't understand the concept, trying to tell us how we should do it because of local codes and traditions. Tradition is one of the things that gets in the way of evolution, and we're going to see that more and more as we get deeper into trouble on this planet. But the project it stands now in Stamner Park in Brighton, and it has led to possibly a 16-unit project on the beach in Brighton, which will really launch Earthships and the sustainable building techniques in the UK. The building that is actually built there, that we built the first room of, is a design that we call the hybrid design, and we actually have an example of that design in the greater world community here in Taos. We did a project in Valencia, Spain, the same story as Brighton, where a whole building is going to be built. We went over and did one room, At this point, we're arranging seminars where the local people, and not even local, people came from all over Europe for this one, pay a fee to come to the seminar. That helps diffuse the expenses of us getting there and our crew being paid and so on. So a team went there as a result of a couple and their a family paying for drawings and then needing us to help them get started building it. So we arranged the seminar technique of financing these demonstrations, and we're continuing to use it today. There in Valencia, we built one U and educated a lot of other people than just the family as we were doing it, because it was a seminar. So we actually did lectures and really spread a good transfer of knowledge over there as we were building one room. The couple now are going on and building the other rooms. They had actually built a hut around Earthship based on a movie that was made by a couple in the Greater World community and based on a design that kind of came out of the Honduras project. So all of these projects are interrelated and compound upon each other to launch us further into the future. And the Spain project is now being continued on with the couple, and we're in correspondence with them. We are doing a bit of follow-up on this one. And the whole technique, as well as the designs, is evolving. And in Spain, they also had a minor issue on approvals, but the couple that we worked with was fairly hooked into the politics of the area, so it just was a bit of a deterrent, but not much. After the tsunami hit the areas around the Bay of Bengal and the Indian Ocean in that area, there was a lot of devastation, and the needs were, we got an email from a local architect in that area saying that the time for dropping meds and food is over. It's time to rebuild, and we need something to rebuild with that'll be somewhat resistant, that'll keep the people cool in these hot climates and give us water and sewage treatment. So we were asked to come over, and in this case, we had no funding, so we did a fundraiser here in Taos. The people of Taos came up with, I believe, $10,000 to $11,000, and we ended up borrowing the rest from Sentinel Bank and our local Taos bank, and we're still paying it back. But it took about $45,000, $46,000 to do this demo. It took us 5 days of travel just to get there and 5 days to get back, because it's on a remote island out in the middle of the Bay of Bengal. And the island was totally devastated, and again we did a round structure with a cistern that caught water, and we began to install one of the sewage treatment situations, but time and money didn't allow it to get completed. But the building itself caught water and sheltered people and would withstand considerable waves, and again showed them how to use tires and cans and bottles from the island to rebuild with. And it gave them, we clearly saw while we were there, it gave them some hope, and it gave us more of an education on evolving these buildings further. I would like to say thanks to everybody that's involved in any one of these projects, and thank you in advance for anyone who gets involved in the future of the Global Warriors Earthship demonstration projects.